Some of you are going to know the 1970s, some of you are not, and that's okay. But I would ask you for just a moment to imagine that you are in the 1970s. The 1970s, I'm a little kid living in the Oxford Circle section of Philadelphia. And every 3 or 4 weeks, my Uncle Mort comes over to our house, and my Uncle Mort, and my mom, and my brother, and my dad, and I load up in the station wagon, and we drive about 3 hours to the middle of nowhere. But it's a place called Laurelton. Laurelton, Pennsylvania. Laurelton, Pennsylvania is the home to the Laurelton State Hospital. It is at the Laurelton State Hospital that my Aunt Ethel resides. All these many years later, I refuse to use the word lives there because it wasn't about living. It was about warehousing. And I can remember even as a little kid driving up there hours and hours in the station wagon, my brother and I in the back seat and blowing each other like, stop it. My uncle threatening consistently to turn the car around. Never did turn the car around, by the way. We always wound up going to Laurelton. And we got closer and closer and closer to Laurelton, even as a little kid, as I looked at this, I thought, well, I don't know all that much about anything, but it sure looks like a prison to me. There's a lot of razor wire at the top of these really high fences. And I don't know that my Aunt Ethel has committed any crime, right? I don't know that she's done anything wrong, except in the 1970s, my Aunt Ethel had what was known then, and we don't use this term anymore, but thank God for that, but she was labeled as mentally retarded. And for those who were labeled with that, there weren't very many options. My grandfather, whom I never met, had his wife, my grandmother, pass away. He now has 4 children. He does not know what to do. He has a daughter who is the oldest, Ethel, who has all sorts of issues, and he doesn't know how to handle them, and he doesn't know what it is that he's supposed to do. And the people in the city of Philadelphia say to him, look, Mr. Bender, you got to send her away. You can't take care of her. You're not equipped for that sort of thing. He says, well, okay. How do I do that? He says, the first thing you have to do, she has to be arrested. And she has to spend a couple of days locked up in a jail cell before a judge will say she's not capable of taking care of herself. And then we can, and I quote, commit her to the state system. So that's where my Aunt Ethel is. My Aunt Ethel is in Laurelton. And every time we go there, we have to stop at the front desk. And there are these big steel doors with like wire mesh. And you got to sign in. And somebody goes to the locked ward and gets Ethel and brings her down and turns her over, and then we go for the day. And we take Ethel out for lunch. We take my Aunt Ethel out to shop. We take my Aunt Ethel to a little lake where we feed the ducks. Feeding the ducks was always the highlight of the trip. And we would go with bags of bread, and we would feed the ducks. And about the time that we finish feeding the ducks, we go for dinner. Dinner is over. And we all know we've got to take Ethel back to Laurelton. She's got to go back. She can't come with us. And we begin to drive back to Laurelton. And my Aunt Ethel knows exactly where she's going. And she starts saying, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. Can I come home with you guys? Can I come home? No? No, you can't. And we go back into Laurelton, and we go up to the same window with the same people and the same logbook. We got to hand Ethel back over to Laurelton. And she's crying. And she's sobbing. And she doesn't want to go. And there's nothing we can do. Because we've been told, they've all been told, every member of the Bender family's been told, hey, it's where she belongs. You know, people like her, that's where they belong. That's where she stays. And we make a 3-hour trip back to Philadelphia, and my brother and I, knuckleheads that we are, we don't make a lot of noise in the back seat. Because even we have figured out it's not a good place. It's really not some place for our Aunt Ethel. It's not some place for anybody. But I want you to just put that in the back of your mind for a second. I promise you that there's more to come. And we're going to talk more about Ethel as we get towards the end of this discussion. And because you're good people, I'm going to skip right over the 80s and the 90s, and I'm going to get right to the part where Heidi and I are married. And Heidi and I are expecting our first little kid. And we've got every single book that you can get, right? What to expect when you're expecting, how to expect that you're expecting, expectations of expecting that you're expecting, and we read them all. And Heidi is a magna cum laude graduate of a very impressive college. She's smart. Terrible taste in guys, but she's really, really smart. So she takes it all in. We're ready. And Harry shows up, our firstborn. And Harry, as soon as he arrives, is doing stuff that, like, because I'm not as smart as Heidi, I gotta go through the book. Wait a minute, no, this is like 3 months, and he's only a month, and my gosh, he's doing this, and he's doing that, he's a toddler, and he's plotting some revolution or something, but man, he is doing everything he's supposed to do. He hits every milestone he is supposed to hit. He hits it ahead of time. And the kid, whether you believe me or not, the kid has worn Harvard sweats his entire life. And those were his choices. He chose the sweats from Harvard University. He's worn them forever. So we're typical first-time parents. And there's a little bit of ego, right? We're looking at all the stuff Harry is doing. And it's like, it's because of us. I mean, really, he's this big. We were appalled when the hospital said, here, take him home. Like, what are you people thinking? Have you met us? Why? Why would you turn over this baby to us? But Harry does everything that he is supposed to do. And I mean every single solitary thing. So he's off and we're good. And then, year and a half, 2 years later, we're going to have another baby. And we know that it's going to be a girl. And we have picked out the name, it's Julia, and we are ready for Julia. And I must tell you that because again, we knew that we were like the parents of the year, that Julia was going to be just fine. Julia was going to do exactly the same things that Harry did. It's going to be great. Well, Julia shows up, and I should tell you that on the day that Julia was born, we were such professionals that I actually had an audition early that day at QVC. And I was auditioning to be one of the television folks on QVC. And there were a whole bunch of us that went out there, and what you had to do, you had to bring something that you could sell. Okay. I brought a banana. And I peeled it, and I talked about how it was 3 sections, and it was easy to hold, and if you didn't finish the whole thing, you could zip it back up, put it in your pocket. They loved it, by the way. They were ready to sell bananas, and they were ready to offer me the job. But I said to Heidi, well, I'm going to cancel the audition, of course, because she said, well, I think I'm feeling like some sort of contractions or something. And she said, no, look, we're good. She said, we went through with Harry. I'm telling you, not ready yet. You go do the audition, go hang out at QVC, you'll have fun. And if anything is necessary, I'll call you, we'll go to the hospital. So I do go through the whole audition process, and it is great. And then I go home, and Heidi says, yeah, I think we're ready. I said, okay. So we've got our bag, Heidi makes a call to one of her friends to come and watch Harry. And we go to the hospital, and everything is fantastic, and we get there, and we do what you do, and we've got this beautiful baby girl, and we take her home. And I can sit and look at her. I can sit and stare at her, because I just think she's gorgeous. I really think she is the most beautiful little thing I have ever seen in my life. And I'm looking at her, and I'm thinking, man, I gotta practice some things. You know? Like, number one, get her home by 10 o'clock, there's gonna be trouble. Gotta practice that. Gotta say to her, no, he's not good enough for you. What are you thinking? And I think, well, there'll also come a point where I get to have that first dance with her at her wedding, and I'm a terrible dancer. Just so we're all clear, I mean, unbelievably bad dancer. And I'm thinking, this is going to be great. In 25 years, I'm going to embarrass the living heck out of her right there on the dance floor, and that'll be payback for whatever it is that she does, and she will certainly do something. So I got all this stuff going around in my head, and we noticed that she's not actually doing any of the things that are in the book. And we got the whole list, and we've got check marks next to the stuff that Harry did, so we know what she ought to be doing. Right? She's got to turn towards these sounds, or these bright lights, or roll over, or crawl, nothing. Julie doesn't do any of those. Not a single solitary thing. So, we've got friends and family who are there, and they see her, and they see Harry. You know what, Harry at 2 is off doing calculus or whatever he was doing in his room, I don't know. And Julia's just sitting there. And Julia's beautiful. And everybody agrees with me, she's the most beautiful little girl in the history of beautiful little girls. And she's just sitting there. And she's not doing anything. She's not turning when you're clapping or singing. We had 2 big dogs, one of whom was a Irish wolfhound. I don't know if you're familiar with the breed. Irish wolfhounds are essentially ponies that live in your house. And Annie was her name, and Annie would just lick Julia and cuddle around Julia like Julia was her puppy almost. And Julia thought it was okay, but Julia didn't do anything. Julia never pushed Annie away. She never pushed Hogan away, who was the other dog. She didn't do anything except sit there and remind you just how beautiful she was. And the friends and the family would say, well, don't worry about it, Jeff. Don't worry about it, Heidi. She's on her own schedule. That's what it is. When she's ready, she's going to roll over. She's going to crawl. She's going to walk. She's going to dance with you at the wedding. She's going to do all those things. But she's just on her own schedule. You got to give her time. So we gave her time. And we gave her a lot of time. And we gave her more time, and all the while Harry is doing all this stuff and Julia's not. And one day, Heidi is giving Julia a bath, and she notices right at the top of her tush, it looks like a little hole. It's like a little dimple. And we go immediately online, a hole above a tush, what exactly is this? And we come across something called spina bifida occulta. Now, you have to understand the shock that we had when we chatted with the doctor, and he said, oh yeah, that's the good kind of spina bifida. Really, Doc? No, it's fine. It's really not a big deal. But you got to bring her in. We got to do some tests. We got to examine her. So, okay, fine, no, not to worry. So we go the next pediatrician's appointment, and we bring Julia in, and he gives her the once over and does this and does that. So, yeah, we'll run some tests. She probably really is just on her own schedule. Don't worry about it. Okay. As we're walking out the door, the doctor says, hey, wait a minute. Yeah? Come here for a second. I just want to take a look at Julia's hair. Okay. Now, what am I thinking? I'm thinking, she's got good head of hair on her. I'm thinking, comes from my side of the family. I'm thinking it's good hair. Yeah, let's take a look at her hair. It's blonde, it's thick, it's beautiful. And he says, do you notice how her hair spirals out from the very center of her head? No. He says that's not where it's supposed to be. What do you mean? He says, take a look. He says, turn around. Look at the nurse, look at my hair. It starts off center. For most people, our hair swirls out off center. He says, no, we're going to have to do some more tests. We're going to have to get her to see a geneticist. There's some issues here, Mr. Katz, Mrs. Katz. You need to get to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And the little smile in this guy's voice that had been there when he told us, oh yeah, it's a good kind of spina bifida, it's gone. It's gone. And this little hair thing, all of a sudden, is now an issue. And so we go to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and it is the beginning of Julia's little medical adventure. And Julia's medical adventure includes her getting poked and prodded and examined by God knows how many people. More people than I have seen in almost 6 decades. And everybody's got an opinion, but nobody will tell you what it is. Everybody says, well, sure, there's something, but we don't know what it is. Okay, well, what are we supposed to do? There's a lot of this. I mean, it's crazy to me. I look at folks who have got 15 years of post-collegiate education who should be able to tell me, well, here's what it is. And instead there is a lot of, yeah. And we finally interact with some folks who say, well, let's be very clear about a few things. Julia, she's never going to walk. You just need to know that right now. She's never going to walk. It's just not going to happen. Okay. Another doctor says, oh, by the way, you know how we told you last time she's never going to walk? She's never going to walk. She's not going anywhere. You're going to be okay. You know, wherever you put her down, that's where she's going to be. Okay. Another doctor that says, you know how they told you already she's not going to walk, she's not going to crawl? She's not going to turn over. And this is it. Just so you know, this is it. She get bigger. But she's not going anywhere. And we spent a period of time where it was actually, believe it or not, kind of convenient. Right? We take Julia, oh, what a cute baby, put her down, and we can do what we want. She'd be right there. She's not going anywhere. And there comes a point, it's actually not too far after that last photo where you see her in the high chair. She was in our living room, and she turned over. Now, we didn't expect her to turn over, so we weren't really paying attention. She turned over, and she began crawling. We really were not paying attention. But our 2 boys were screaming and hollering and jumping up and down like they were now part of the cheerleader team. Oh my God! Julia's crawling, Julia's crawling, Julia's crawling. She is not. Well, she is. Yes, she is. And she was crawling. And so we kind of thought at that point, you know what? Maybe she'll do some stuff. You know, this could be a really good little sort of thing. I mentioned that I had boys because while we're dealing with all the Julia stuff, We got another little guy who shows up. Joe is our little guy. Joe's our, chronologically, Joe's our baby. But Joe's not really the baby, right? Julia's always going to be the baby. And so Joe functions more like the middle child. And whereas my oldest boy wants to do nothing except fight and debate and discuss, which is why we always referred to him as our litigator, even when he was this old. Joe, there he is. Joe wants everybody to be happy. Joe wants everybody to have a smile. Joe just wants it all to be okay. When we go through all of the activities you have to go to when you have a family member with special needs. So we see a variety of doctors, we see any number of bureaucrats, and I will tell you just personally, if you've not been involved in that system, it's a little bit like the merry-go-round. And it is a merry-go-round that goes at warp speed. And you've got to somehow, some way figure out how you jump up on that merry-go-round and hold on for dear life to go around once or twice, maybe 3 times. And every time you go around, there's somebody up in this trying to push you off. It's why places like the Friendship Circle are so vital. Because people like Julia do not have the opportunity to advocate for themselves. And it is incumbent upon the rest of us to pick up that mantle. It's my duty to take care of Julia in that way. Well, Julia has a great life. I gotta tell you something. Julia's got a great life. Julia goes to school. Julia does all sorts of exciting things. Julia, for the first time ever, there's a photo up there of me walking her to a school bus where she didn't have to be in her wheelchair. And I'll tell you what, I was the proudest father ever as we did that. And it was a beautiful occasion. There's an opportunity where Julia goes on a class trip and she's coming down an escalator. She's never come down an escalator in her life. And here's 2 teachers right next to her. And we have had throughout the years, Julia's 21 now, we have had teachers and physical therapists and speech language therapists and this therapist, and I gotta tell you something, these are the best human beings on the face of the earth. And anytime that you get an opportunity to talk to someone who is a teacher or a therapist helping special needs kids, you gotta give them a hug or a handshake, because what they do is absolutely incredible. So Julia has a lot of opportunities to do some pretty good stuff. Now this little thing here, Dear Julia, happens when Julia turns 15 years old. I was working down here in Richmond, but we couldn't find services for Julia that were appropriate. And so I was making this ridiculous commute from Richmond back to Boston, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And when Julia turned 15 years old, they were all in Boston, and I was here. And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was miserable. Because they were there and I was here. And I wrote Julia a letter. I said, well, you're never going to read this. And I can read it to you, but you're not going to understand it. But here's a whole bunch of stuff that I just wanted to put down on paper. And I wrote it, and I put it up on Facebook. And I went to bed about 4 o'clock in the morning. At about 7 o'clock in the morning, I reach over for my phone, and there's text after text after text after text from people who have said, oh my gosh, I just read this letter to Julia. This is incredible. And one of them was my old editor at the Boston Herald, who said, Jeff, I just read this story. This is unbelievable. Would it be okay if one of our writers called you and we did a little something on this? Sure. I had no idea that anyone had read it or that anybody really cared about it one way or the other. So we did that story, and it winds up on the front page of the Boston Herald. And even when I was a columnist for the Boston Herald, I would have done just about anything to be on the cover of the paper each and every day. It was wonderful. Well, that letter to Julia was the beginning of me writing letters to Julia, and I write them every year now. That original letter has now been shared more than 1 million times around the world. and people know a little bit more about Julia, which I think is great. But I want to take you to this whole cookie thing. See, Julia doesn't speak. She laughs, she giggles, she smiles, gives kisses and hugs, but doesn't speak. And there are certain things that Julia loves. I'd like to think her dad is on the list. I know that water and music are on the list. And at the top of the list, cookies. I've been asked what Julia's favorite cookie is, and it's an easy answer. It is whatever cookie she happens to be eating. It might be a friendship circle cookie, it could be a chocolate chip cookie, it could be an oatmeal cookie, an oatmeal raisin cookie, an iced cookie, a non-iced cookie, an Oreo, a double stuff, a vanilla Oreo double stuff. It doesn't matter. Her thing is cookies. And we knew that. And every time we would have something good, we try and think about what words Julia might know, right? What words does Julia recognize? Cookie is number one on the list. I'm just here to tell you that. Cookie, she knows. In addition to that, this kid is able to hear a cellophane wrapper about 5 miles away. And she goes and she's there for that cookie. So we know what we give to Julia to make Julia happy, right? It's cookies. Julia came home from school one day, and it was a normal day in school. We'd open up her thing, and here's what she did, and we're always hoping that Julia goes to the bathroom when she's at school, because that's one of the things Julia is not really able to do. And as lovely as Julia is, and as adorable as my daughter is, it can be a real pain when you're dealing with diapers for somebody who's 21 years old, just a fact. So we go through the list. Oh, look at this, it's a great day. Look, she did that at school, and she did this, and this is, oh, perfect. So we take Julia back to her room. Now, her room is really part of our bedroom. And we have it secured. Right? You can go back to when you had a baby in your house. Baby-proofed like nobody's business. We had a baby gate. The baby gate had bungee cords on it, on top of it, to make sure that it stayed closed. We had a dresser and some other things propped so that you could not move that gate. And Heidi and I would go in there, and we would be puzzled by how we closed it in the first place, because we couldn't figure out how to get it open again. So she's safe. So we've given Julia a cup of juice, a cookie, got a show on, fresh diaper. She's set. And we go on about what it is that we're doing. So I am working from home. Heidi is getting dinner ready. You remember when I mentioned QVC? So we have a Ron Popeil rotisserie cooker, which we got from Ron Popeil. Told you, I was right for QVC. But Heidi has got this beautiful chicken. She's got it in the rotisserie. We do that outside. So she's outside. She's got the rotisserie doing rotisserie stuff. And you said it and you forget it was what Ron used to say. So she's doing that. I'm working, and all of a sudden there's a scream. And I don't mean a scream like, hey, UPS is here, Amazon's here again, something like that. I mean a scream. And it's just like, Jack, you need to get here immediately. Oh my God. What's wrong? What has happened? There's something terrible that has happened. There's a meteor that's come through the house or something. No. Julia is in the middle of the kitchen. And I mean the middle of the kitchen. And surrounding her are crumbs, pieces of cookies, half-eaten cookies, mushy cookies, not so mushy cookies, oatmeal raisin, iced, not iced, chocolate chip, every variety of Oreo that you can even begin to imagine. And she is in the middle of it. She is the queen of the cookie. And she would take one cookie up and take a bite and then fire. And then she would reach down and she'd pick up another cookie and bite it and throw it. And it was the most amazing mess that I had ever seen in my life. They were everywhere. I mean, everywhere. So, I'm sort of off to the side, and to be perfectly blunt, I thought it was kind of cool. Heidi was not as thrilled as I was with this whole cookie kingdom she had set up. The dogs, best day in their lives. So, we kind of look at each other, Heidi and I do, and I'm going to say right now, Julia did not miss a beat. She was happy to keep eating those cookies with the audience. I'm looking, Heidi's looking, Pixie is looking, Charlie's looking, and she's going everywhere. Well, Pixie and Charlie, those are the puppies, by the way. Pixie and Charlie start eating the cookies, and I think they're doing a very good job. To me, I'm very happy that they got the whole cleanup thing going on. We picked Julia up, and Julia is absolutely appalled that we are about to remove her from this setting. This is what she has lived 21 years trying to do. And we walk her back to her room. Now, of course, Heidi and I are trying to figure out, wait a minute, which one of us took her back there? Somebody didn't lock the door, right? Somebody did not do something. Somebody has to be held responsible for what happened here. I am sure that it was Heidi who did not put the door back. I didn't say that, but I am absolutely sure that that's what happened. What we figured out, and by the way, this is after the vast majority of the cookies were gone. I mean, this is just one tiny little contingent of what was left there. What happened was that Julia figured out what she wanted. When I deliver this presentation for businesses, this is where we go, right? You've got something you want to do. You have something that you are supposed to do. And it is about identifying whatever that cookie happens to be. And it might be increased sales. It might be getting voted as the best bakery in all of Central Virginia. It could be you're going to be the best special education teacher that anybody has ever seen. But you have some goal, and you got to go get it. That's the lesson from Julia. So here's what I learned from Julia. Julia, despite the fact that she was in this safe room, figured out how to open that baby gate. And she then figured out how to get from her room to the kitchen. It's not a straight shot. She has to navigate around this big bureau. And then she has to turn, and she has to go out the doorway. Now there's a little hallway there. She's got a choice. She go right, she go left, she goes right, there's no cookies. If she goes left, there's cookies. She went left. And then she somehow makes her way through the living room. Now the living room has this step-down section. Julia doesn't know anything about steps. Julia doesn't know that you can trip or fall, or at least that's what we thought. But Julia figures out how to navigate right past all of those steps. She doesn't knock anything off of the wall. She gets to the kitchen. Now, the hallway to the kitchen, she could have kept going. No cookies, but she could have gone. She makes another left-hand turn. She goes into the kitchen. Now she's in the kitchen. She doesn't touch the stove. She doesn't touch the stove top. She doesn't open the drawer where there are knives or scissors, because Julia doesn't know anything about sharp. Julia doesn't know anything about pointed. She doesn't know any of this stuff. But she might have known something about some of this stuff because she didn't go there. And then she goes to the pantry. Now the pantry is a good 7 feet tall, I guess. You open both doors and there's a million shelves. And Julia goes in there And it's only cookies. It's only cookies. Their boxes of cereal, doesn't touch it. Bags of rice, no interest. Baking soda, baking flour, no. Bags of raisins. Well, I mean, raisins are part of some cook. No. No raisins. No soup. No gravy. No ramen noodles. It's cookies. She's there on a mission. She came for the cookies. She's not leaving without the cookies. And she did. She took every single solitary cookie out of every single solitary package. And it was the most glorious mess that we had ever seen. So I want to ask you to go back for a second when I told you about my Aunt Ethel. Because when I kind of left that on the side there, we had just taken Aunt Ethel back to Laurelton. We signed her back in, and we can hear from the other side of this steel door. We can hear screams, and we can hear crying, and we can hear wailing and moaning, the likes of which you don't want to hear. And that's where we had to leave Aunt Ethel. And every couple of weeks we would go and we would do exactly the same thing when we went to visit. And we knew that Aunt Ethel loved for dinner, she loved steak, so we would always go someplace where Aunt Ethel would have steak. And Aunt Ethel loved to feed those ducks, so we'd always save up breadcrumbs and we would go and feed the ducks. But we knew, as soon as we got there, we were just counting down to taking Aunt Ethel back and having Aunt Ethel go behind that big steel door. And she didn't deserve to be there. And it wasn't good for her. And it wasn't right. Well, a couple of years later, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania came up with this really nifty idea. He said, you know, instead of having all of these folks in these facilities, why don't we try and have them in the community? And they came up with community group homes. And Aunt Ethel got accepted. My mom, my uncle filled out the paperwork, and she got accepted for one of these homes. And it was a couple of months before we were able to visit her again, but we went to visit her. And it wasn't nearly as far away. It was maybe an hour and a half away. And we got there, and Ethel was very happy to see us. Thought it was fine that we had come to visit. We all went out to lunch, and then we took her back to the home, and we were talking about other stuff. She said, hey, got stuff to do. Yeah, got stuff to do. She and the other ladies in the group home had to make dinner. They had plans to go see a movie. They were taking care of the pet cat that was in the house. She had a life. She had a life. And she deserved a life. And I would dare say that she cherished that life in some way every single day. I'm hoping that those who have not been through this understand a little bit of what this journey is. Some of the things are common amongst all of us. Right? Everybody who's got a special needs kid can tell you something, and somebody else go, yep, been there, done that. But every one of our kiddos, no matter how old they are, is entitled to a life. Each and every one is entitled to somehow explore and build on what it is that they've been given. I mentioned to you, Julia doesn't speak, and Julia's never spoken, and doesn't appear as if Julia's ever going to speak. But I will tell you this, that in 21 years, Julia has touched more people in more ways than I have in 30 plus years of broadcasting and 20 plus years as a professional speaker. She's done that. And I don't ever presume to tell anybody what their faith should or should not be, but I will tell you this. I look at that face, and I see the face of God. I see pure joy. I see pure happiness. I see a human being who has embraced what is right, who loves a breeze, who loves splashing in the water, who loves the sound of music, and who loves cookies. You've got a cookie. I don't know what it is. You got to figure it out. You got to figure out what your cookie is. You got to have your quest for your cookie, because I'm telling you, if Julia's able to do it, you're able to do it. No doubt in my mind. So I thank you all for coming out. You know,